managing nonprofit organization that is supporting the EdSAFE AI Alliance. Dextera is a international nonprofit with members across Europe, the US, who are engaged in transforming the ed tech market and supporting interoperability, data management, and next generation education solutions to be developed. We do that through managing communities of practice that want to shift the market. EdSAFE AI Alliance is one of those. For today's discussion and meeting, we have a pretty clear agenda. We want to welcome all of you, again, representing small startup enterprises, large companies, ministries of education, professional associations or consortiums, colleges, universities, and other education entities, among others, who have joined us here today. We want to be clear on who we are after our collective process over the last few months to help define and determine where we are going. I'm going to share what we've done as a recap, introduce you to the team, and some of you have met those of us involved now in our growing team, and really share the roadmap forward, and then get into discussion if we have time for today's session. We've really been thinking a lot over the since August, when we announced this open invitation to folks around the world to join into an alliance to grow benchmarks to help support and build trust in the ed tech world and in the education world and the sectors around it to use AI in a successful and safe manner. And today we want to share that we are the EdSAFE AI Alliance, and we want to move forward collectively, quickly, and in an engaged manner with partners to develop these benchmarks and collective actions. I'd like to welcome in our other catalyzing organization and the leadership that has helped co-found the EdSAFE AI Alliance, and Jim Larimore. And again, we'll do larger introductions later, but I'd like Jim to pick up and to share what we are, as part of what we are with this. Jim.
Terrific. Thank you, Dale, and good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on what part of the world you're in today. So there is an old African proverb that many of you are probably familiar with, that when you want to go fast, you should go alone, and when you want to go far, you should go together. And the EdSAFE AI Alliance is an organization that wants to go far. We want to go as quickly as we can. And one of the ways that we'll do that is by creating an alliance that brings together a wide range of different types of organizations and associations, people from the research field, as well as the policy and advocacy field, as well as innovators and education practitioners, a variety of people, so that we can really truly pull together a representative cross-section of the broader tech and AI ecosystem. So our purpose in this is really to get the benefit of insights and experience and talent that each of you brings to the mix. And we're very proud today to officially launch the work of the Alliance. So if we could go to the next slide. To level set the conversation and as a refresh for some on the call, we have decided that we will push forward with conversations about benchmarks and definitions across different areas of standards, or areas that we believe there's a need for standards, including safety, which we've defined as cybersecurity, data security, privacy, and a commitment to do no harm. Ability, and where we'll start there is really trying to define stakeholder responses around the use of AI in education. Fairness, which is a complex composite of equity, ethics, and bias. We'll see what other things emerge in discussions with the working groups that we'll describe a bit later there. And really trying to get at this, what positive or constructive use of AI is making in terms of engagement or learning outcomes or other desired outcomes. But it provides us also a nice convenient acronym, SAFE or SAFE, to help explain to the world what we're doing and why we're doing it. So if we could move to this. Okay, and here I'll introduce our managing director, Beth Havenga.
Thank you, Jim. It's great to be with all of you this afternoon. Um, we've spent, as Dale said, a lot of time in the last couple of weeks trying to come up with what we can be doing to really further our mission and support the entire education ecosystem. And we've come up with 8 key areas that we're going to be focusing on. To start with, it's building that network that Dale and Jim have been discussing, bringing together everything that's going on in this space, and also creating an environment of trust, not only for our members to understand that all of us agree with the same way of working within this ecosystem, but also then outwardly, so that we can stand for this network and be known for creating that level of trust. Increasing the visibility and awareness of these topics. A lot of times they're seen in a one-sided manner or only partially. And this then also relates to other issues that are happening, especially around sort of fear-based decision-making. In line with that as well, a key thing that we're going to be working on, especially in the first 12 to 18 months, are education initiatives to try and build up some of those knowledge gaps so that we can really effectively promote understanding around what all of the different components of the SAFE categories are, and also the different workings within AI and machine learning. To do that, we're going to come up with some common definitions, some common vocabularies and frameworks at a global level, so that we know that we can create understanding, and we know that we can then work together on the same things. We're going to really focus on thought leadership, also building on those education initiatives to lead the way with some of the things that we're thinking about, the fairness, the safety components. We're also going to, as part of that, start facilitating and leading events, workshops, writing papers within our community, which will lead to some of the benchmarking and standardization initiatives that we've been discussing within the entire AI education ecosystem. And as a follow-up from that, then we're hopefully going to work together on some frameworks for certification at a global level.
Great, thank you, Beth. We want to share a little bit about what we have been doing. And again, many of you on this call and later this evening in the second meeting have been direct participants in this activities. Again, we started with an open invitation in August of this year to help us shape, first and foremost, that list that Beth just described, where we have really worked hard to interact, engage, speak with folks, learn from folks, and get involved with their networks to really define our activity, to fill a gap, really, that we've now seen collectively in the marketplace, that to help build this trust, we need to do a lot of work and activity. So we're proud, as of today, to let you know that our engagement and activities with many parties continues to grow. We have over 150 entities or participants that have reached out and become active with the EdSAFE AI Alliance. We now have representatives across 16 different countries and larger international associations who have expressed an interest to be active, engaged members of this community. Many of them have participated in different ways. Many of them, or some of them, at the community planning meetings. We've had 3. We've had community planning meetings on a monthly basis with regular interaction with many folks between those meetings. We've also been invited by many parties around the world to share this opportunity and to invite folks. And so the most recent discussion was with the EdCrunch conference, which covers all of Russia and Kazakhstan and other regions connected there. With about 20,000 folks, we've opened the invitation to them, as well as to folks across Israel through Israel EdTech Week, the German Digital Summit, and many other opportunities have already come. And we're starting to see engagement from there. Completing the membership agreements and paperwork continue with many of those folks, and we'll talk a little bit more about the governance process in a bit. The other thing that has transpired is we have seen quite an interest from funders, both philanthropic and governmental entities, who see a very clear need to establish trust, benchmarks, and understanding in the marketplace. They see the potential benefits for AI-enabled education technology to support equitable education delivery and success, but they also see the fear and downside with no benchmarks or trust in the marketplace. And so we as a collective have been invited already by some large and small entities to seek funding, and that will be an activity that goes forward for us. Jim?
Yep. So as I mentioned in an earlier comment, what we really want to do is to bring stakeholders together from across the broader education and AI education ecosystem. And we are confident belief in this is that if we are able to work together, define standards, communicate those effectively to the public and policymakers, then we will ensure that there is an opportunity for growth and success in the market. In particular for those products and resources that people are creating that will meet up with the new definitions and standards around safety for the use of AI in education. So next slide, please. Okay. Yeah, and Beth, can I turn to you for this one?
Sure. I think a lot of you will know some of these structures if you've been part of these calls before, the ways that we've been thinking about how membership could work and how some of the organizational structures around the decision-making committees, the way that we really want to include a lot of the experience that all of you are bringing to the table as well, and the way that we then implement that into some of our working groups. We have different levels of membership that we've been discussing up till now. And we also have different bodies that we're hoping can really get hands-on and support the work that we're doing, either from a leadership capacity or also down to really getting into it with us with the working groups. For some of you who've been in these calls before, we've been doing a lot of thinking about how to best make this more accessible to a wider group. And we've been breaking down some of the different sections here, especially the mission supporter category, so that we can come up with an idea that is easy for everyone to find themselves and to figure out exactly where they fit in, exactly how they can participate, what they can bring to the table. And there's always a way of working with us either way to figure out how you could bring some kind of in-kind thought processes into the mix as well. As part of this, we've also been doing a lot of work in developing a really strong a comprehensive statute for the organization so that it's very clear how we want to be working not only towards the outside, but also together, how we can come together in a neutral manner, and also how we want to conduct ourselves as a group when we're working together, as well as some of the banal things like how to become a member and how to then no longer be a member should that be the case. We're doing a lot of work around that, and we're really excited to hopefully share that with you in the coming days as we finalize that.
Great, thank you, Beth. One thing I will note, we have taken a core principle from the beginning of this open invitation and this alliance formation, that we want to ensure that no matter where you find yourself in joining this as a member, whatever level that may be, that we have representation in all levels of our governance that equate to those membership levels. And it's something that will continue going forward. As I noted before, and you've heard from three of us, we wanted to make sure you had a chance to get at least an introduction, if you haven't met us, to those of us who are involved in either the founding and leading of the EdSAFE AI Alliance. There will be more additions to come, and we are asking for your help, and we'll get to that soon. But with that, let me just start with just very briefly an introduction. There's a link of these slides. And this video will be posted on our site in the near future, but you can always go to our website to find out more information. But as I said, I'm Dale Allen. I come to the Dexterra Institute as a co-founder, having led institutions of higher education, both at the individual, at 2-year, 4-year, public, private, and state systems in the United States. And for the last 10 years, I've been collaborating international activities to really remove barriers for equitable education delivery, and was fortunate to collaborate with Jeff Merriman and colleagues at MIT to form the Dexterra Institute as a shared space where we could build open technology solutions to help and to shift the market, as I described before. With that, let me ask Jim to introduce himself, then we'll go to Beth, and finally to Russ Schilling.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dale. Yeah, I think I'll move in the direction of being a little personal with some of the background so that folks will have an opportunity to develop different kinds of relationships or understand maybe sometimes where my perspectives come from. I'm a first-generation college graduate of Comanche, Japanese, and Scots-Irish descent. My work in higher education for many years was as a student affairs dean, where I was an advocate for students and primarily focused on addressing equity issues around access and student supports to get people through to completion, which often meant changing the way that institutions operated. I took that background with me into the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation on the post-secondary success team at a point where they were trying to understand how to incent different types of decision behavior on the part of universities to think about new strategies for student success. And that work then led me unexpectedly to ACT, a research and assessment organization, where my job was to help establish new partnerships and to think about ways that the data that organization possessed could be put into use for the public good, basically to help improve learning very broadly. And from ACT, the next unexpected step in my career was to join RID Labs, which is an artificial intelligence and education startup organization where the 3 I's in our name, and this will give you a sense of why they invited someone with an equity background to join early. Our founder's vision was to leverage artificial intelligence to remove inequality, inefficiency, and inconsistency from education. And that's why we have the 3 I's for inequality, inefficiency, and inconsistency. I've known Dale and Dexterra for a number of years and was grateful, for that connection as we started to explore ways that we could help shape the ecosystem and bring together a circle of trust among people that we know and organizations that we're becoming familiar with to try to do some good in the world at what I think is a really critical time to address social inequality and challenges in education that were just aggravated due to the global pandemic. And with that, maybe I'll turn to Beth.
Hi, Beth. I think you can normally find me in Berlin, Germany, currently in Norway, originally from Australia, trying to bring in the international component over here, sort of single-handedly. I have previously done a lot of work with different ministries of education over here. I've been on their special committees looking into digitization strategies, as well as looking into digitization structures for anything through K-12, higher ed, and then also vocational learning. I come with a background strongly focused on creating organizations like this, different alliances, nonprofits, as well as with a focus on interoperability and standardization. So I've also been and continue to be actually the head delegate from Germany to the European Commission on their standards body to help develop standardization for learning technologies. I also then am tasked from the German Ministry of Education to help define the standardization processes, and I'm their counterpart at the EU level as well. I've most recently been the managing director of the German Alliance for Education and the European EdTech Alliance. I'm bringing together sort of hundreds and thousands of different organizations at a German and a European level, respectively. I've also started my own 2 startups, one in the States, one in Germany. So have a good idea of what some of our struggling startups are going through as well in terms of getting their heads around this, and then have most recently also been working very closely together with a lot of the different data protection agencies, which always leads me back to trying to bring everyone together to really understand how each of the stakeholders works and how we can better educate and really support all the different decision-making processes that are part of all of this work.
Can I jump in?
Please go ahead, Russ. I was
Yes.
going to say, let's ask Russ to introduce himself as well.
Yeah. So I'm Russell Schilling. I've got a rather broad background coming into all of this. So I spent 22 years in the military as an experimental psychologist, teaching at the Air Force Academy and Naval Postgraduate School, fostering advanced technology programs and training, education, and psychological health. I was a DARPA program manager for my final tour in the Navy. I also worked while I was in the military for 6 years with Sesame Workshop to build and produce programs for military children to help them cope with grief and other adverse conditions related to military life. Left in 2014 to join the Obama administration to run STEM education programs at the Department of Education and coordinate across the federal government. At the end of the administration, I jumped out and worked with the Gates Foundation, Digital Promise, and Chan Zuckerberg Initiative and others to help develop the new Advanced Education Research and Development Fund. Left there and was the Chief Scientific Officer for a few years at the American Psychological Association. So I've got a broad background in policy, research programs, and innovation development. Very happy to be part of this team. It's there are pieces of this I've wanted to see go forward for a very long time. My background is I'm from Appalachia, so I grew up in rural West Virginia, and really know why we need these systems to increase equity across the board. I'm happy to be here working with all of you. So
Great, thank you. And Beth, let me turn it back to you to pick up kind of now where we're going, where our roadmap is, and we'll be going. So with that, Beth, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. As we started to pick apart what we wanted to do as a whole, we then started to try to put some more meat on the bones as to what we can actually do in the next little while, especially within the next 3 to 4 months. So if you go to the next slide, we're looking for 2022 to really work on developing the messaging, as well as identifying these knowledge gaps within the work that we want to do in terms of education and visibility. That's where all of you come in as well. This is going to be part of the work we do within our working groups along all of the different topics that you've identified as interesting for yourselves within this work. That we can really look together and see where the gaps, where the pain points, where the challenges, so that we can start proactively creating information packages around those, which are going to be sort of those knowledge building documents. We also want to define and identify sustainable funding opportunities to move forward. So this isn't only a membership supported organization, but that we really have other revenues coming in as well. We're going to be working on a variety of events, not only of our members, but then also ones that we want to really initiate ourselves. We're going to be building out our team, as Dale has mentioned, and we're going to be working together with our governance council and really trying to work at all different levels of leadership to get those hands-on approaches to support our work and building out our membership network. If we look at sort of more of the concrete steps around that, we have our big goal of coming up with these benchmarks and working together to really define these frameworks. In the next couple of months, however, going down sort of a little bit more into the detail, we're going to initiate the initial working group meetings. We're going to be inviting everyone to those within the next couple of months. As I mentioned before, these are really to define those gaps, the pain points, the challenges, so that we can start proactively working to develop some of those education documents. And that's going to also tie into defining more of the messaging, as well as that common vocabulary I discussed earlier, along a comprehensive communication plan. I mentioned the funding before. I'm going to skip then to the members and leadership. It's important that we have representation from all parts of the ecosystem and from every level of the education system. We're going to really be focused as well, not only on all the different layers of education, but also geographically, so that we have a fair representation at a global level. We're going to be convening those initial leadership and governance meetings, and I might just quickly hand over to Dale to give you a little bit of background information about those bodies too.
Yeah, and so we have, as we've always discussed, and I mentioned before, we want to make sure we have representation of all different levels of membership and types of organizations and geography involved in our governance. Again, defined currently as kind of an advisory council, and then eventually a steering committee would emerge out of that as well, to help govern our activities. But just to give you a sense, the folks that have already stepped forward and sought out the opportunity, the types of organizations to be involved with the leadership and the governance, include folks like, on the corporate side, folks like Ascend Learning and Carnegie Learning, and even startups like Carousel. In the nonprofit sector, we have folks like the John N. Gardner Institute, which is involved with hundreds of educational organizations here in the United States focused on equity and educational success in early college years. Jet Education Services from across, they work across the African continent, but are located in South Africa. We have school districts like the Harris School District in Colorado Springs, and their head technologist who has been active and involved. We have nonprofits like Assessments, which is dedicated in utilizing AI and technology-enabled aspects to deliver more math improvement and educational improvement across hundreds and thousands of schools in the United States and Canada. And you have folks that are supporting the EdTech kind of infrastructure, like the Iowa EdTech Collaborative. And then, as Beth noted, folks in the EU with the EdTech Alliance also emerging. And on the educational side, we have proud educational institutions who have been leading these efforts and involved, like the University of Hawaii system and the Open University of Catalonia, which is headquartered out of Barcelona, Spain, but has a worldwide impact, being in over 90 institutions or 90 countries themselves with online delivery. So I just wanted to give people a sense of these are the types of folks that have already stepped forward and will be involved in the governance. But there's many more of you and others who will be joining from other geographic regions, as well as across the different governance levels, membership levels. So with that, Beth, let me turn it back.
Thank you. The only other two things we're going to be strongly focused on in the next couple of months are building out that team. We've identified a couple of positions that are really key for us to move forward, as well as developing those event series and also working together with all of you to see where we should be. If you can go to the next slide. Great. We have sort of our initial structure of where we hope to be. We prioritized some of the key positions that we're going to be needing along that. And if you go to the next slide, Dale, we need your help because we are looking for some key roles, especially around the idea of content creation and communication strategies, so that we're looking for people who can really help create good ways of making challenging and complex topics accessible, informative, that we can then work with them at a global level. We're also looking for somebody who can really support the standardization work that we're going to be doing, not only from a technical perspective, but then also working along the different structures that we are going to need in order to make the working groups flow really well, and to help define those different strategies and structures that we need. So if you do have any ideas or suggestions, we'd love to hear them. If there's anybody who you think, yes, that would fit perfectly, please let us know. And we'll continue to then grow out our team as we go along. If you go to the next slide. The ways that you can participate and the ways that we'd love to see you participate with us. As I mentioned, we're going to be inviting you all to our initial topic workshops. We are going to be looking at each of those topics that are part of the membership application or the initial expression of interest. So anyone who's registered for all of those will be receiving information from us. We're also going to be building up those knowledge building resources, and we would love your participation to ensure that what we're building is really applicable to each of your respective environments. And we also have a number of events that are going to be discussed shortly that we'd love to see you participate in as well. On top of that, we'd love feedback on the membership structures, the way that we've defined them, on the priorities that we have, on some of the roadmap that we've been discussing. And as I mentioned before, any recommendations for people who you think absolutely need to be a part of this. Hand back over to you then.
Yeah, if we could ask maybe Jim, if you could pick up the next couple slides, that would be great.
Sure. Yeah, so as you think about the coming year, 2022, things that we would love for you to keep in mind with respect to the Alliance. One is that we do have an agreement with UNESCO to participate in a variety of events together, including meetings that will be organized with the UNESCO Global Education Coalition, COVID allowing. So we'll kind of play it by ear to see which events may be virtual and which may be in person. We also have, we're kind of working now towards a more specific plan to have a presence at the ASU GSV Summit in 2022, which is going to revert back to the normal April timeframe. So I think the event dates are April 4th through the 6th in San Diego, California. We'll put together a variety of panels there so that we can highlight some of the work that the Alliance is doing and bring some participants together to talk about both policy and practice. And for those of you who work more directly with teachers, we'd love to be able to put together at least one session that highlights teacher voice or maybe teacher and student perspectives on the use of AI and what EdTech innovators and investors should understand about what the public is looking for in terms of technology-enabled or AI-enabled tools. So we will continue to promote opportunities like this, and we'll hope to be able to see you both online and in person in the months to come. And if there is something that you think that you could help organize in terms of having an EdSAFE AI program or session or other type of component in the activities of your own networks, then please let Beth know or reach out directly to Dale and me, and we will try to connect things up as quickly as we possibly can. But we look forward to working together with you and looking for ways that this work can benefit you and the organizations that you're involved in. Okay, and next slide, please. And so now we kind of end where we began in some respects. Dale has been a proponent of this from the very beginning, that we want this to be both an inclusive and interactive or engaging opportunity for people to come together. We think that collectively we're going to bring a lot more knowledge and talent to the table than any of us could hope to do on our own. And so I'd like to open this up. I'm not sure if we have any limitations, Dale, on whether people participate.
We do. So Jim just gave this great notion and belief that I have that engagement is always critically important, and we want to hear from people, and then we choose a webinar format that doesn't allow you to speak freely. So think of that what you will. But if you do have a comment or a question, you could use the Q&A function to post that. Or you can also post something in chat, and we'll monitor both, but we'll give people a chance to post there, and then we can respond in that manner. Unless Lauren advises me differently, there might be other mechanisms that she could share. You can also raise your hand. Thank you, Lauren, pinged me. You raise your hand and we can also grab you there and pull you in. So we'll give a few moments for that.
Oh, I see Bror.
Hold on.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, Bror.
Hey, all. Yeah, Bror Saxberg. I have a question for you. This sounds really exciting.
Bror, can I just interrupt you? Could you just introduce yourself and where you're from, just so people get a sense, and then go with your question? Sorry.
Oh, sure. So yeah, Bror Saxberg. Most recently, I was the head of learning sciences for the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, and have spent, I don't know, 20, 25 years acting as what you could now call a learning engineer in this ecosystem, although we didn't call it that back in the mid-90s when I really jumped into all this.
Yeah.
And so this work of using data to drive changes in performance and to help adapt instruction, whether the data is used or to build an AI or otherwise, is just really important and interesting. And one question I had was, there are a number of other global organizations like the Global Science of Learning Network. There's things like Project Phoenix. There's things like the Alliance for Learning Innovation in the US that's trying to do R&D work with the federal government and a broad collection and so forth. There's Icicle connected to IEEE. There's a product, a guy named Wade Shen, as well as Arati Prabhkar, are building out an organization that's doing kind of ARPA-like work. And one of the projects is called EdSAFE, which is about how do you do analytics on very deep and rich data sets in a very safe way. So I don't know, I mean, it would be really interesting for you guys, since you probably have many more organizations like that, to help to build out just a directory of who else are you connected to that you want to pull together and is being pulled together to do this work. Because it would be great, as you guys said, to start to build common language, common approaches across these many engaged and interested players, rather than starting with 5 years of kind of different languages being created.
Well said, Bar, and thank you for joining. And your comment is right on, Mark. We have started this and will continue this with, there are lots of folks and organizations that are interested in aspects of this and have their own networks, and we want to help convene, facilitate, and then share common information. But Beth or Jim or Russ, maybe you have additional comments to that, but kudos for the question, comment. It's right on.
Yeah, we definitely. I love the idea. Yeah, I love the idea of a database or a directory. I think that's a really smart way of being able to bring everyone together and then also find out who's working on what. I think one of the things we've been discussing in the past weeks is there are so many initiatives that we know at a global level that are also working on exactly the same thing. And what we want to do is really bundle the strengths that everyone has to further these topics instead of having people working on the same thing and putting their energy into essentially the same work. So we'd love to do that. And I think that's a fantastic idea. Thank you.
Yeah, and part of our philosophy is to leverage all of these different groups and actually help them push forward their agendas as well. So I think that's a major goal for us.
Yeah, and maybe I could just use 2 examples that have already kind of been put in place on that. One is at the global level with UNESCO and Global Education Coalition. They have a new broadband commission working group called Data for Learning, which is to develop policy and advocacy and best practices around some of the aspects you just mentioned, Bror. And so we have aligned our efforts to kind of help facilitate and support that working group. But also share outputs from that, so we can, share and leverage talents, but also share the outputs to continue to broaden the knowledge sharing. And the second is more, I'll reference one of the groups you mentioned of IEEE. They have hundreds of different subcomponents and sub-organizations even, but one of them is on adaptive instructional systems. And we've been working with them to have the same discussion where they have expertise and have a tremendous amount of volunteers from companies around the world who are involved in developing potential standards in a very specialized area. So to enable them to maybe facilitate and lead the working group that we could share the outputs from EdSAFE AI Alliance as it relates, but also to strengthen their activities with additional capacity. So great ideas and some tangible examples of things that are already moving in that direction with global parties as well as local.
Yeah, and given that we're staffing out some of this, it will really help those organizations who are dependent entirely on volunteer work from people with full-time jobs.
Yeah, great. Other questions or raise hands or chats that may come in?
It looks like
Stephen Ritter.
Yeah.
Hey, Steve Ritter, Carnegie Learning. One of the things I wanted to kind of bring up that I think we'll need to think about is kind of the scoping of what the organization's involved with. So, I don't know if there's a working definition of AI, but when everybody talks about it, it's like, well, AI, machine learning, adaptive learning, there's a lot of kind of overlap between those things. And I guess there's both a positioning thing and a reality and sort of communication, as part of the function of the organization in communicating that there's a concern, and our scope ought to be about kind of advanced uses of data, whether or not, somebody classifies that somehow as AI. So do you have some thoughts on like how you think about that scope if you know, an organization doesn't see themselves really as being an AI organization, but let's say an adaptive learning organization that may or may not be using techniques that other people would consider AI?
Yeah, good question, Steve. And I know we have thoughts, and I know part of our interest is to define things in a collective way and that knowledge so that we can create education. But I'll defer to Beth to maybe add flavor or perspective on that. But I think your question is spot on, and we need to make sure it's in our scope.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think one of the first steps that is really important to us is working on those definitions and then finding out how we can be as inclusive as possible. And also part of the education initiatives are going to be focused as well on working with these other groups and reaching out to aligned organizations.
Great. Any other questions or comments? If you want to raise your hand, we'll give it another minute or so.
Yeah, good comment about in bloom, Barar. Sing on your questions.
And I see that Karen has raised her hand if someone wants to pull her in.
If I could just answer to that as well, I think the reason why it's so important to also bring some of those other stakeholders to the table is because of things like this. So I think it's just as important to have some of the data protection agencies on board to help define some of the work that we're doing so that we're not going in a direction that may be problematic to some of the people who have to implement it as well.
Great. Karen?
Hi, everybody. I'm glad to be here. I think this is really exciting and really necessary.
Could you just sorry to interrupt. Could you introduce yourself and your organization?
Oh, I'm sorry. Karen Vigneron, Vice President of Digital Transformation for Student Success at the Association of Public and Land Grant Universities. For those outside of the US, that means we represent the largest publics throughout the country in the United States, as well as a handful of those from Canada and Mexico. We've been doing a lot of work with the adaptive learning systems. And one of the concerns that I have for this group and the ways that we think about our work is really informing leadership. And what I mean by that is it's really hard. And I'm not just talking about presidents here, I'm talking about provosts, those in academic leadership about what this work is. So we have a twofold job, right? And in other ways, we would call it translational science, right? So we have to not only understand what we all are talking about, but we've got to translate that into some way that they really understand what we're working on. Because what I'm hearing now is sort of unfortunate is that AI is the savior, and therefore we're not going to do the hard work that we need to get to using AI well. So anyways, I'd love to make sure that we are figuring out a way, and maybe that's your communication specialist or lead, but we are figuring out a way to make this message very clear to leaders in higher ed across the world.
Yeah, excellent point. And again, back to all of the comments that the collaboration and alignment and building a shared network and shared outputs and understandings needs capacity. So we have to add to that, but we have to collaborate with folks like you, Karen, and your organization and others across the other continents as well. Anyone else on the leadership team want to add into that?
Yeah, no, I think,
after yours.
Yeah, I think the cross-cultural component for the communications plan is going to be critical as well. So we can't make this just US-centric or Euro-centric.
Right.
Jim?
Yeah, and to build on that, I think that Karen, one of the things I like about your question is that it kind of pushes us to think about kind of communication in a more nuanced way. And I do think that one of the benefits of the Alliance and the network of contacts that many of us have is that we can identify not only good consultants who may be able to help us with different pieces of this, but we may be able to tap as someone who spent many years in the university world, we may be able to tap some former provost or CFO friends to take a look at material or to be a sounding board for us as we really think about tailoring the messaging to make sure that we get it right on one side of this. On the other side, I think of with our colleagues from the Center for Democracy and Technology, participating on the call today as well. We have to make sure that the things that we say are consistent with other messages that will direct towards other constituencies. So I think that we'll have a really robust internal conversation, and then the opportunity to leverage our networks. And I think this is all going to come down to matters of clarity, transparency, honesty, and trust at the end of the day.
Great, thanks, Jim. Give one last opportunity for raising of a hand or a question or answer. These have been excellent, and again, excellent. They'll add flavor and improve what we're doing always. So.
While we're waiting, I might just also jump in terms of what Karen suggested. I think it's not only just looking at the decision makers and the leaders at the higher ed level, but in a variety of different capacities. I think we've got so many different decision makers who are struggling. Over on this side of the world, we have a regulation that's just coming into play at an EU level that we need to work very strongly with, just because a lot of what they're trying to come up with will be very inhibitive innovation and coming from a fear-based sort of decision-making mode that we'd like to support them then with information.
Yeah. And we also can't forget about the public communication strategy, because again, I mean, getting back to Brewer's question about, or comment about InVoloom, a lot of that was driven by misunderstandings from the public. And so again, if we don't do a good job on that side, we've lost as well.
Right.
Great. All right, one last look. I think we have no outstanding hands, questions and answers. Wonderful. You got a chance to meet all of us today in both an introduction, declarative statement of who we are and where we're going as EdSAFE AI. We do it with you. You can email us all at the edsafeai.org emails listed. And we all will have other emails too, but please email any questions, comments, or suggestions to us. You will all be receiving direct communication from us in the coming weeks. We obviously have a little bit of a holiday break around the New Year and Christmas season and holiday seasons that are going on, but expect rapid and active communication, as well as events and coordination, and the working groups to be formulated coming forward. So thank you. Just a reminder, if you have not registered, officially register for us for joining in, complete your membership documentation. There's also an interest form that will help shape those working groups as they're originally formed and to get you onto the right ones. So with that, I want to thank my colleagues who have put the work in to make this possible. I want to thank all of you for joining in, and I look forward to working shoulder to shoulder with each of you in the coming year to make this a reality and bring this to life in a broader way. So thank you, everyone. Have a great day.